Billionaire offered Waitress $12 million to change her life. What she did next made him speechless. Before we start the story, leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from, and at the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Emma Rodriguez wiped down table 12 for the third time that morning, her ponytail swaying as she moved with practiced efficiency through Sunset Diner. The morning rush was brutal as always, but she'd been working there for 2 years and could handle anything. Well, almost anything. "Excuse me, waitress?" The sharp voice cut through the breakfast chatter like a knife. Emma turned to see a man in an expensive suit snapping his fingers at her from table 7. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his watch probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his attitude screamed, entitled Rich Boy. "My name is Emma, and I'll be right with you," she called back, finishing with her current customer. The man's jaw tightened at having to wait even 30 seconds. When she finally approached his table, notepad ready, he didn't even look up from his phone. "I want Eggs Benedict, but I want the hollandaise sauce on the side. The English muffin toasted exactly medium, not light, not dark. And I want organic, free-range eggs. Also, your coffee tastes like dishwater, so bring me something decent." Emma's pen stopped moving. "Sir, this is Sunset Diner, not a 5-star restaurant. We have regular eggs, regular toast settings, and the coffee is what it is. Would you like to order something from our actual menu?" Now he looked up, his steel gray eyes meeting hers with obvious annoyance. "Do you know who I am?" "Should I?" Emma shot back, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me guess. Another investment banker who thinks the world revolves around his portfolio?" The man's eyebrows shot up. He wasn't used to being talked to like this, especially not by service staff. "I'm Alexander Stone." "Congratulations. I'm Emma Rodriguez. Now that we're introduced, would you like to order something we actually serve?" Alexander leaned back in his seat, studying her with newfound interest. Most people either knew his name from business magazines or quickly apologized when they realized he was someone important. This waitress was doing neither. "Fine," he said slowly. "What do you recommend?" Emma's expression softened slightly. "The blueberry pancakes are amazing, and our coffee might not be gourmet, but it's strong and it's hot. Most people seem to like it just fine." "Most people," Alexander repeated, amused despite himself. "And you're assuming I'm not most people?" "Well, you did just complain about our coffee tasting like dishwater and demand free-range eggs at a place where the most expensive thing on the menu is $12, Emma pointed out. "So yeah, I'm going out on a limb here and guessing you're not most people." Before Alexander could respond, Emma's manager, Rick, appeared at her elbow. His face was flushed with anxiety as he recognized the man at table 7. "Mr. Stone, I'm so sorry for any inconvenience. Emma, go help table 12. I'll take care of Mr. Stone personally." Emma's stomach dropped. She glanced between Rick's nervous expression and Alexander's suddenly smug face. Apparently, Alexander Stone actually was somebody important. "It's fine, Rick," Alexander said, never taking his eyes off Emma. "Emma was just explaining your menu to me. I'll take the blueberry pancakes and the dishwater coffee." Rick's face went white. The dishwater? He means regular coffee," Emma said quickly. "I'll get that order started." She hurried to the kitchen, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Maybe she had been a bit harsh, but the guy had been rude first. Still, if Rick knew who he was, Emma had probably just messed up big time. 20 minutes later, she delivered Alexander's pancakes with extra care. "Here you go, Mr. Stone. Is there anything else I can get you?" He took a bite and nodded approvingly. "These are actually very good. And you were right about the coffee. It's not gourmet, but it does the job." Emma felt a small surge of relief. "Glad you like it." "Tell me something, Emma Rodriguez," Alexander said, setting down his fork. "Why do you work here?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're clearly intelligent, you're not afraid to speak your mind, and you have strong opinions about customer service. Why are you waiting tables at a diner?" Emma's defenses went up immediately. "What's wrong with waiting tables? It's honest work." "I didn't say there was anything wrong with it," Alexander said calmly. "I'm just curious about your story." Something in his tone made Emma pause. He seemed genuinely interested, not condescending. "I'm saving money for nursing school. This job pays the bills while I finish my prerequisites at community college." "Nursing," Alexander repeated. "That makes sense. You have a good bedside manner. When you're not insulting your customers." Emma couldn't help but smile. "You deserved a little insulting. You were being pretty demanding." "Fair enough," Alexander agreed. He left a $50 tip on a $15 check and stood to leave. "Good luck with nursing school, Emma." As he walked away, Emma stared at the money on the table. $50 was more than she usually made in tips all morning. Maybe Alexander Stone wasn't such a bad guy after all. She had no idea that he owned a private equity firm worth $3 billion, or that he was already thinking about seeing her again. Over the next 3 weeks, Alexander Stone became a regular at Sunset Diner. He came in every Tuesday and Friday morning, always sat at table 7, and always requested Emma as his waitress. Their conversations grew longer and more comfortable, though Emma still didn't hesitate to call him out when he acted too entitled. "So let me get this straight," Emma said, refilling his coffee cup. "You're complaining that your penthouse apartment is too big and you get lonely?" Alexander shrugged. "It's 15,000 square feet. Sometimes I go days without seeing another person." "Then invite people over, have a party, get a roommate. I don't know, join a book club." "A book club?" Alexander nearly choked on his coffee. "What's wrong with book clubs? You read, don't you?" "I read financial reports and merger documents." Emma rolled her eyes. "That's not reading, that's work. When's the last time you read something just for fun?" Alexander had to think about it. "I honestly can't remember." "That's sad," Emma said bluntly. "No wonder you're lonely. You need hobbies that don't involve stock markets and acquisitions." "How do you know I'm involved in acquisitions?" Emma gestured at his expensive suit and watch. "Lucky guess. Plus, you tip like someone who makes serious money, and you're always on your phone talking about portfolios and mergers. It's not rocket science." Alexander found himself laughing. Emma had a way of cutting through his carefully constructed persona and seeing things clearly. It was refreshing, even if it was occasionally uncomfortable. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do for fun when you're not working or studying?" "I volunteer at the free clinic downtown on weekends," Emma said. "And I read actual books, stories with characters and plots and everything." "What kind of stories?" Emma's cheeks turned pink. "You'll laugh." "Try me." "Romance novels," she admitted. "I know they're cheesy, but after dealing with rude customers and studying medical terminology all day, I like reading about people falling in love. It's hopeful." Alexander didn't laugh. Instead, he found himself wondering what kind of romance Emma would want in her own life. The thought surprised him. He'd never been particularly romantic himself. "That doesn't sound cheesy," he said. "It sounds nice." Emma looked at him with surprise. "Really? Most people think romance novels are silly." "Most people probably haven't read any," Alexander pointed out. "Maybe you could recommend one sometime." Before Emma could respond, a commotion erupted at table 3. A middle-aged man in a business suit was yelling at Sarah, one of the newer waitresses. "This is completely unacceptable. I ordered my steak medium rare, and this is practically raw. What kind of establishment are you running here?" Emma frowned and glanced over. She could see from where she stood that the steak looked perfectly fine, medium rare, just as ordered. The man was clearly one of those customers who complain just to get free food or to feel important. "Sir," Sarah was saying nervously, "I can have the kitchen cook it a little more if you'd like." "A little more. This is completely inedible. I demand to speak to your manager, and I want this meal comped. This is disgraceful." Emma felt her temper rising. Sarah was sweet and hard-working, and she didn't deserve to be bullied by some jerk having a bad day. Without thinking, Emma walked over to table 3. "Is there a problem here?" she asked politely. The man looked her up and down dismissively. "Are you the manager?" "No, I'm another waitress, and I can see from here that your steak is cooked exactly how you ordered it. Sarah's been doing this job for 6 months, and she's never gotten an order wrong." "Excuse me." The man's voice got louder. "Are you calling me a liar?" "I'm saying that steak looks fine to me, and maybe you should treat the staff with a little respect instead of throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child." The entire diner went quiet. Emma realized she'd just made a huge mistake, but it was too late to take it back. The man's face turned red with rage. "A spoiled child? How dare you? I'm going to make sure you never work in food service again. Do you know who I am? I'm Robert Hayes, and I own 3 restaurants in this city." Emma's heart sank, but she stood her ground. "I don't care if you own 30 restaurants. That doesn't give you the right to abuse the staff." "We'll see about that," Hayes snarled. He stood up and marched toward Rick's office, pulling out his phone as he went. Emma sank into the nearest chair, suddenly shaky. She'd definitely crossed a line this time. Alexander appeared beside her, his face concerned. "Are you okay?" "I think I just got myself fired," Emma said quietly. "Rick can't afford to lose business over my big mouth." 20 minutes later, Rick emerged from his office looking grim. "Emma, I need to see you." Emma followed him back to the tiny office, her stomach churning. Rick sat down heavily behind his desk and rubbed his temples. "Emma, you know I like you. You're one of my best waitresses, and you work harder than anyone else here." "But," Emma prompted, "but Robert Hayes is threatening to leave bad reviews on every platform he can find. He says he's going to tell other business owners not to eat here. I can't afford that kind of bad publicity." Emma nodded, fighting back tears. "I understand." "I'm sorry, Emma, I really am. But I have to let you go." Emma cleaned out her locker with as much dignity as she could muster. The other staff members looked at her with sympathy, but no one said anything. They couldn't risk their own jobs. As she walked past table 7, Alexander stood up. "Emma, wait." "Don't," she said quietly. "Just don't. I need to go." She left Sunset Diner for the last time, not knowing that Alexander Stone was already on his phone, making calls that would change everything. Alexander Stone sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Stone Capital Management, staring out at the city skyline without really seeing it. It had been 3 days since Emma was fired, and he couldn't stop thinking about the injustice of it all. He'd done some research on Robert Hayes and discovered the man was exactly what Emma had called him, a spoiled child who used his minor success to bully service workers. Hayes owned 3 mediocre restaurants that barely turned a profit, and he had a reputation for being difficult with staff and suppliers alike. Meanwhile, Emma Rodriguez was probably at home, trying to figure out how to pay next month's rent without her diner income. Alexander picked up his phone and dialed his assistant. "Monica, I need you to get me some information." "Of course, Mr. Stone. What do you need?" "I want everything you can find on a company called Sunset Restaurant Group. They own a chain of diners, including one called Sunset Diner on 5th Street. Right away, sir. Anything else? Yes. Set up a meeting with their CEO. Tell them Stone Capital is interested in discussing an acquisition. By that afternoon, Alexander had the information he needed. Sunset Restaurant Group was a small chain of 12 diners across the state, owned by a man named Frank Morrison, who was nearing retirement. The company was profitable but not growing, and Morrison had been quietly looking for a buyer for the past year. Perfect. The meeting took place 2 days later in Alexander's office. Frank Morrison was a heavy-set man in his 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands, clearly someone who'd worked his way up from the bottom. "Mr. Stone," Morrison said, settling into the leather chair across from Alexander's desk, "I have to admit, I'm surprised by your interest. Sunset Restaurant Group isn't exactly the kind of high-tech startup your firm usually acquires." Alexander smiled. "We're diversifying our portfolio. The restaurant industry can be very stable with the right management approach." "Well, I appreciate your interest. As I'm sure your research showed, we're not a big operation, but we're solid. Good locations, loyal customers, decent profit margins." "I've reviewed your financials," Alexander said. "Very impressive, especially the 5th Street location. That seems to be one of your top performers." Morrison nodded. "Rick Davis runs a tight ship there. Good staff, too. Though I heard they had some trouble with a difficult customer recently." Alexander kept his expression neutral. "Oh? What kind of trouble?" "One of the waitresses apparently got into an argument with some local restaurant owner. Had to let her go, which is a shame. Rick said she was one of his best employees, but sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect the business." "Sometimes the hard choice is standing up for what's right," Alexander said quietly. Morrison looked at him curiously. "True enough. Anyway, what kind of offer are you thinking about?" Alexander slid a folder across the desk. "I'm prepared to offer $12 million for the entire chain, with the condition that you stay on as a consultant for the first year to ensure a smooth transition." Morrison's eyes widened as he opened the folder. The offer was nearly double what he'd been hoping to get. "Mr. Stone, this is very generous, but I have to ask, what's the catch?" "No catch. I want to modernize the operations while maintaining the community feel that makes these diners special. Think upgraded equipment, better marketing, maybe some menu expansion, but keeping the same neighborhood atmosphere." "And the staff?" "Everyone keeps their jobs," Alexander said firmly. "In fact, I'm planning to implement some improvements. Better health insurance, paid sick leave, maybe tuition assistance for employees pursuing education." Morrison stared at the contract for a long moment. "You know what, Mr. Stone? I like you. You could have tried to lowball me, but you didn't. And you're talking about taking care of my people? That means something to me." They shook hands on the deal. 3 weeks later, the acquisition was complete. Alexander now owned 12 diners, including Sunset Diner on 5th Street. His first order of business was to pay a visit to his newest property. He walked into the familiar restaurant on a Tuesday morning, wearing jeans and a casual button-down instead of his usual suit. Rick Davis looked up from the register with surprise. "Mr. Stone, I wasn't expecting— Rick Davis, manager. It's an honor to meet you, sir." "Nice to meet you, Rick. I wanted to stop by and see how things are running." "Oh, everything's great, sir. Really great. We're honored to be part of the Stone Capital family." Alexander looked around the diner. It was busy as always, but something felt different. The energy was subdued, less cheerful than he remembered. "How's your staff doing?" he asked. Rick's smile faltered slightly. "Fine, sir. Everyone's working hard. No complaints." "What about the waitress who was let go a few weeks ago? Emma something?" Rick's face went pale. "Emma Rodriguez, sir." I'm sorry about that situation. I know it probably looked bad for the business, but I had to make a tough call." "Actually," Alexander interrupted, "I've been reviewing the incident, and I think you made the wrong call." Rick stared at him in shock. "Sir?" "From what I understand, Emma was defending a coworker from an abusive customer. That's exactly the kind of employee I want working for me. Someone who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult." "But Mr. Hayes threatened to—" "Robert Hayes is a bully who owns 3 failing restaurants," Alexander said coldly. "His opinion means nothing to me. Emma Rodriguez's integrity, on the other hand, means a great deal." Rick looked like he might faint. What would you like me to do, sir?" "I want you to call Emma and offer her job back, with a raise. Make her a senior waitress and tell her the new ownership would very much like her to return." "Of course, sir. Right away." Alexander nodded. "Good. And Rick, in the future, I expect you to support employees who do the right thing, even when it's inconvenient. Especially when it's inconvenient." As Alexander left the diner, he felt satisfied for the first time in weeks. Emma would get her job back, and she'd never have to know that he was behind it. As far as she'd know, the new mysterious owner had simply made a smart business decision. It wasn't until he was back in his car that Alexander realized he was nervous about seeing Emma again. What if she'd found another job? What if she didn't want to come back? What if she somehow figured out what he'd done? He shook off the worry. Emma needed this job, and she deserved to have it back. That was all that mattered. At least that's what he told himself. Emma stared at her phone in disbelief. Rick's voicemail was playing for the 3rd time, but she still couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "Emma, it's Rick from Sunset Diner. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to call me back as soon as possible. The restaurant was recently acquired by a new company, and the new owner specifically wants to offer you your job back, with a promotion and a raise. I know we didn't part on the best terms, but please call me back. This is a legitimate offer." Emma set the phone down and rubbed her temples. In the 4 weeks since she'd been fired, she'd been living off her savings and working occasional shifts at a coffee shop across town. The pay was terrible, and she was already behind on her rent. She'd also had to drop one of her classes because she couldn't afford the textbook. Her dreams of nursing school were starting to feel more and more impossible. And now Rick was calling with some story about a new owner who wanted to hire her back. It sounded too good to be true. But then again, her bank account was down to less than $300. Even if it was some kind of joke, she had to find out. She called Rick back. "Emma, thank God you called me back. Are you free to come in this afternoon? I'd like to explain everything in person." 2 hours later, Emma walked through the familiar doors of Sunset Diner. The lunch rush was in full swing, and she felt a pang of nostalgia watching Sarah and the other waitresses weaving between tables with practiced efficiency. Rick waved her over to a corner booth, his face bright with nervous excitement. "Emma, I'm so glad you're here. First, I want to apologize for how everything went down. I should have stood up for you, and I didn't. That was wrong." Emma blinked in surprise. In all the time she'd worked for Rick, she'd never heard him admit to making a mistake. "Okay," she said slowly. "What's this about a new owner?" 3 weeks ago, we were acquired by Stone Capital Management. The CEO personally reviewed your termination and decided it was handled incorrectly. He wants to offer you a position as senior waitress with a 20% raise and full benefits." Emma's head was spinning. "Stone Capital? That's a big investment firm, isn't it? Why would they care about one fired waitress?" "I don't know," Rick admitted. "But the owner was very clear. He wants employees who stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. He specifically mentioned your integrity. He knows about what happened with that customer?" He reviewed the whole incident. "Emma," he said, "Robert Hayes is a bully whose opinion doesn't matter. He was actually impressed that you defended Sarah." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. After weeks of wondering if she'd ruined her career over a moment of principle, someone finally understood why she'd acted the way she did. "What would being senior waitress mean?" she asked. "You'd help train new staff, handle difficult customers, and basically be my second in command for the floor. Plus, the new ownership is implementing tuition assistance for employees pursuing education." Emma's breath caught. Tuition assistance? Up to $5,000 per year for college courses. I know you were working toward nursing school. This was definitely too good to be true. Emma had never heard of an investment firm caring about diner employees' education, let alone offering to help pay for it. "Rick, this is all very generous, but it doesn't make sense. Why would some billionaire investor care about helping waitresses go to college?" Rick shrugged. "Maybe he's just a decent guy who believes in investing in people. All I know is that the offer is real, and I really hope you'll take it. This place hasn't been the same without you." Emma looked around the diner. She'd been happy here, at least until the incident with Robert Hayes. The work was honest, her coworkers were good people, and with a raise and tuition assistance, she might actually be able to afford nursing school. "When would I start?" she asked. Rick's face broke into a huge grin. "How about tomorrow morning?" The next day, Emma arrived at Sunset Diner 30 minutes early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She'd barely slept the night before, partly from excitement and partly from the nagging feeling that something about this whole situation was too convenient. As she tied her apron and prepared for the morning rush, Sarah bounced over with a huge smile. "Emma, I'm so glad you're back. I missed having someone around who actually stands up to jerky customers." "Thanks, Sarah. How are things with the new ownership?" "Honestly, amazing. They upgraded all the equipment in the kitchen. The new health insurance is incredible. And rumor has it they're planning to renovate the whole place. Plus, everyone got a small raise." Emma felt another flutter of unease. All of this generosity seemed unusual for a business acquisition. Most new owners looked for ways to cut costs, not increase them. The morning rush began, and Emma fell back into her familiar rhythm. She'd forgotten how much she actually enjoyed the work when she wasn't stressed about money. With the raise and benefits, she felt like she could breathe again for the first time in weeks. Around 10 o'clock, Rick approached her with a nervous expression. "Emma, I need to give you a heads up. The owner might be stopping by sometime this week. He likes to check on his properties personally." "What's he like?" Emma asked, curious about the mysterious benefactor who'd changed her life. "I've only met him once, but he seemed intense. Very smart, very direct. Kind of intimidating, actually. But fair." Emma nodded. She was definitely curious to meet the man who'd given her this second chance. She had no idea that Alexander Stone was sitting in his car across the street at that very moment, working up the courage to walk through the diner's front door. He'd driven by 3 times in the past week, always finding an excuse not to go in. What if Emma figured out what he'd done? What if she was angry about his interference? What if seeing her again made him realize he'd made this massive business decision for completely personal reasons? Alexander had bought 12 restaurants for one woman, and he was starting to think he might be losing his mind. But as he watched Emma laugh at something Sarah said, her whole face lighting up with genuine joy, Alexander knew he'd made the right choice. Now he just had to figure out how to face her without revealing the truth. Alexander finally worked up the courage to enter Sunset Diner on Thursday morning. He'd changed clothes 3 times and practiced casual conversation in his car, like a nervous teenager. This was ridiculous. He negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat. But the thought of facing one waitress had him completely rattled. The morning rush was winding down when he pushed through the familiar doors. The diner looked the same, but there was a different energy, more relaxed, more optimistic. His investment was already paying dividends in employee morale. Emma looked up from wiping down table 4 and froze when she saw him. "Alexander?" She blinked in surprise. "What are you doing here?" This was the moment Alexander had been dreading. He'd prepared several different explanations for his presence, but suddenly his mind went blank. "I was in the neighborhood," he said lamely. "Thought I'd grab some coffee." Emma's expression was unreadable as she gestured toward his usual table. "Table 7's open if you want your regular spot." As Alexander sat down, he noticed Emma seemed different, more confident, less stressed. The promotion and raise were clearly doing her good, which made him feel simultaneously pleased and guilty. "I heard you got your job back," he said as Emma approached with a coffee pot. "Congratulations." "Thanks." Emma poured his coffee with professional efficiency. "It's actually better than before. New ownership came in and made a lot of improvements." "That's great. You deserve to work somewhere that appreciates you." Emma studied his face carefully. "It's funny, actually. The new owner specifically wanted to rehire me. Said he was impressed by my integrity." Alexander kept his expression neutral despite his racing pulse. "Smart businessman. Good employees are hard to find." Emma didn't look entirely convinced. "What can I get you for breakfast?" "The usual is fine. Blueberry pancakes and dishwater coffee." That earned him a small smile, which made Alexander's chest feel strangely tight. As Emma walked away to place his order, Alexander tried to act normal, but his eyes kept following her around the diner. She was training a new waitress, and he found himself impressed by her patience and natural teaching ability. She would make an excellent nurse someday. "Here you go," Emma said, setting down his pancakes 15 minutes later. "Anything else I can get you?" "Actually, I was wondering, how's nursing school going?" Emma's face lit up with excitement. "Really well, actually. I was able to add back the class I had to drop, and I'm ahead of schedule now. The new ownership offers tuition assistance, which is incredible. I might actually be able to graduate a year early." Alexander felt a warm glow of satisfaction. "That's wonderful, Emma. You're going to make a great nurse." "Thanks." Emma hesitated, then sat down across from him. "Alexander, can I ask you something?" Alexander's stomach clenched. "Sure. How well do you know Stone Capital Management?" The question hit Alexander like a physical blow. Had she figured it out? "Why do you ask?" "It's just weird timing, you know. You're this successful businessman who's been coming here for weeks, and then suddenly Stone Capital buys the restaurant chain and specifically asks for me to be rehired. It seems like quite a coincidence." Alexander's mouth went dry. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Do you know the owner of Stone Capital?" Alexander stared into Emma's intelligent brown eyes and realized he had two choices: lie to her face or tell her the truth and risk losing her forever. He chose a third option. "Emma, what would you say if I told you that sometimes successful people make business decisions based on more than just profit margins?" "I'd say that's a very diplomatic way of not answering my question." Alexander couldn't help but smile. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that." "So I've been told." "Alexander, I need to know. Did you have something to do with me getting my job back?" Before Alexander could answer, Rick appeared at the table looking flustered. "Mr. Stone, I didn't know you were... That is, I wasn't expecting." Rick's face went white as he realized what he'd just said. Emma looked between Rick's panicked expression and Alexander's resigned one, and the pieces clicked into place. "Mr. Stone," she repeated slowly. "As in Stone Capital Management. As in the owner of this restaurant chain." Alexander closed his eyes briefly. "Emma, I can explain." "You're the mysterious new owner," Emma said, her voice eerily calm. "You bought 12 restaurants because I got fired from one of them. It's not that simple." Emma stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Oh, it's not? Then please, enlighten me. Why would a billionaire buy an entire restaurant chain for one waitress?" The entire diner had gone quiet. Customers and staff were staring at their table with unconcealed curiosity. Alexander was acutely aware that this conversation was about to become very public very quickly. "Could we discuss this somewhere more private?" he asked quietly. "No," Emma said firmly. "I want to understand this right now. Did you buy Sunset Restaurant Group because of me?" Alexander looked up at her, at this fierce, principled woman who just called him out in front of a room full of people, and realized he was completely in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it made him feel oddly calm. "Yes," he said simply. "I bought the company because you were fired unjustly, and I wanted to fix it." Emma stared at him for a long moment. The diner was so quiet you could hear the coffee maker gurgling in the background. "That's insane," she said finally. "Probably. You spent millions of dollars on a restaurant chain because you felt bad about my employment situation. 12 million, actually. And it wasn't just guilt, Emma. It was because you're the most principled person I've ever met, and you deserve better." Emma shook her head in disbelief. "I need some air." She walked out of the diner, leaving Alexander sitting alone at table 7, with a plate of cold pancakes in a room full of staring strangers. Rick approached the table cautiously. "Mr. Stone? Is everything okay?" Alexander left money on the table and stood up. "I need to go apologize to your best waitress before she decides never to speak to me again." He found Emma sitting on the bench outside the diner, her head in her hands. "Emma." "Go away, Alexander. Or Mr. Stone. Whoever you are." Alexander sat down beside her, leaving space between them. "I'm the same person I was 20 minutes ago. I just have more money than you realized." Emma looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? For weeks I've been grateful to this mysterious benefactor who believed in me. And it turns out it was just some rich guy I complained to about his breakfast order. That's not why I did it." "Then why?" "And don't give me some line about my integrity. People don't buy restaurant chains because they're impressed by a waitress's work ethic." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, trying to find the right words. "Do you remember the first day we met?" he asked finally. "When you called me out for being demanding and entitled?" "Vaguely," Emma said sarcastically. "Most people don't talk to me like that. They either want something from me, or they're afraid of me, or they're trying to impress me. But you looked at me like I was just some guy being rude to the waitstaff." "You were being rude to the waitstaff." "I was. And you called me on it, even though you didn't know who I was or what I could do for you. That's rare, Emma. Honest people are rare." Emma was quiet, processing his words. "Then I kept coming back," Alexander continued, "and every conversation we had made me realize how lonely I'd been. You made me want to read books just for pleasure. You made me think about having hobbies that didn't involve stock portfolios. You made me remember what it felt like to just talk to someone. So you bought me a job?" "I bought you justice," Alexander corrected. "You were fired for doing the right thing. That was wrong, and I had the power to fix it." Emma turned to look at him directly. "Alexander, I can't be your charity case. You're not charity. You're the most capable, hard-working person I know. The restaurant chain is lucky to have you. But I wouldn't have the job if not for your feelings." Alexander considered this. "Emma, do you think your nursing patients will care why you became a nurse, as long as you're good at it? That's different. Is it? You want to help people. I helped you help people. The motivation doesn't change the outcome." Emma was quiet for several minutes, watching cars pass by on the street. "I need some time to think about this," she said finally. "I understand. And I need to know that my job is secure, regardless of whatever this is between us." "Your job is secure," Alexander said without hesitation. "I'll put it in writing if you want. Your employment has nothing to do with my personal feelings." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, I need to get back to work." As she stood to leave, Alexander caught her hand gently. "Emma? For what it's worth, I've never done anything like this before. I don't make impulsive business decisions, and I definitely don't usually chase after women who insult my breakfast preferences." Despite everything, Emma's lips twitched into a small smile. "Your breakfast preferences were pretty insulting." "Fair enough." Emma looked down at their joined hands, then back up at Alexander's face. "I need time, Alexander. This is a lot to process. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk." As Emma walked back into the diner, Alexander remained on the bench, wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, or taken the first step toward something amazing. 3 days passed without Alexander visiting the diner. Emma found herself looking toward table 7 every morning, expecting to see his familiar figure reading financial reports over blueberry pancakes. When he didn't show up, she felt oddly disappointed. She'd spent those 3 days thinking about everything Alexander had told her. The more she considered it, the more she realized his actions, while extreme, came from a place of genuine caring. He could have fixed her situation in dozens of easier ways, but he'd chosen the one that would benefit not just her, but all the employees at every Sunset Diner location. Still, the knowledge that her entire life had been turned around by one man's feelings for her was overwhelming. Emma had always prided herself on her independence, and now she felt like she owed her future to Alexander's generosity. On Saturday morning, Sarah approached her during a quiet moment between the breakfast and lunch rushes. "So, are you going to tell me what happened with your mysterious billionaire boyfriend, or do I have to keep pretending I didn't hear the whole thing?" Emma sighed. "He's not my boyfriend, and apparently he's not that mysterious anymore either." "Emma, the man bought a restaurant chain because you got fired. That's like fairy tale level romantic." "It's not romantic. It's complicated." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Honey, most women would kill for a man who thought they were worth $12 million. It's not about the money, Sarah. It's about, I don't know, autonomy. I wanted to succeed on my own merit." "And you are succeeding on your own merit. You're an amazing waitress. You're going to be an incredible nurse. And you stood up for me when that awful customer was being horrible. Mr. Stone just made sure you got the recognition you deserved." Emma considered this perspective. Maybe Sarah had a point. "Besides," Sarah continued with a grin, "have you seen the way that man looks at you? Like you hung the moon or something. When's the last time someone looked at you like that?" Emma had to admit that no one had ever looked at her the way Alexander did, like she was the most fascinating person in the room. Even when she was being sarcastic or difficult, he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. "I just don't want to feel like I owe him something," Emma said quietly. "What if instead of thinking about what you owe him, you thought about what you might want to give him freely? Before Emma could respond, the lunch rush began, and she was swept back into the familiar rhythm of taking orders and serving customers. But Sarah's words stayed with her throughout the day. That evening, after her shift ended, Emma made a decision. She drove to the address she'd looked up online, Alexander's office building. The 42-story tower was impressive and intimidating, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. The security guard in the lobby looked at her casual clothes with obvious skepticism. "I'm here to see Alexander Stone," Emma said, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I think he'll want to see me. I'm Emma Rodriguez." The guard made a phone call, spoke quietly for a moment, then hung up with a surprised expression. "Mr. Stone will see you. 42nd floor, elevator bank B." The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Emma's palms were sweaty, and she kept second-guessing her decision to come here. What was she going to say? What did she even want from this conversation? The doors opened to reveal a sleek reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. A well-dressed woman behind a modern desk smiled at her professionally. "Ms. Rodriguez, Mr. Stone is waiting for you in his office, right through that door." Emma knocked and heard Alexander's voice telling her to come in. She pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into an office that was bigger than her entire apartment. Alexander was standing behind his desk, still wearing a suit despite the late hour. He looked surprised and pleased to see her, but also nervous. "Emma, this is unexpected. I wanted to talk to you somewhere that wasn't the diner, neutral territory." Alexander gestured toward a seating area with comfortable chairs near the windows. "Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thanks." They sat across from each other, the silence stretching uncomfortably. Finally, Emma spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, about justice and helping people. And I think maybe I've been looking at this all wrong. You didn't buy me a job, Alexander. You bought me an opportunity. What I do with that opportunity is up to me." Alexander's posture relaxed slightly. "That's exactly right. But I need you to understand something. I can't be with someone because I feel grateful to them. That's not a foundation for any kind of relationship." Alexander's face fell. "I understand. Emma, I never meant for you to feel obligated." "Let me finish," Emma interrupted. "I can't be with you because of gratitude, but I might want to be with you because you're kind and intelligent, and you make me laugh, because you actually listen when I talk, and you remember things I tell you, because you read romance novels just because I recommended them." Alexander's eyes widened. "You noticed that?" "Hard to miss when you started using terms like meet cute and slow burn in casual conversation," Emma said with a smile. "Not exactly standard business vocabulary." "I may have gotten slightly obsessed with the genre," Alexander admitted. "Though I have to say the male leads in those books have nothing on the stress of trying to figure out real emotions." Emma laughed. "So what happens now?" "I don't know," Alexander said honestly. "I've never been in this situation before. I've never cared about someone the way I care about you. That's terrifying and sweet at the same time. Pretty much how I feel every time I see you." Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. "This is crazy, you know. A waitress and a billionaire. People are going to have opinions." Alexander joined her at the window. "Let them. I stopped caring about other people's opinions the day you called me out for being demanding about my eggs. Benedict. I still can't believe you tried to order eggs Benedict at a diner." In my defense, I had no idea what was appropriate diner food. I'd never eaten at one before. Emma turned to look at him in amazement. "Never? How is that even possible? When you grow up with money and then make more money, you tend to stick to a certain type of restaurant. Sunset Diner was my first experience with normal food. That's so sad, Emma said sincerely. You've been missing out on some of the best comfort food in the world. I'm learning, though I think I need a guide to help me explore all the normal experiences I've missed. Emma smiled. I might know someone who could help with that. But she'll expect you to return the favor and show her some of those fancy experiences she's never had. I think that could be arranged. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out at the city below. Emma was surprised by how natural it felt to be here with him, despite the opulent surroundings. Alexander? Yes? I want to try this, whatever this is. But we go slow, okay? And my job stays completely separate from whatever happens between us personally. Absolutely. Though I should probably warn you, I have no idea how to go slow. I tend to be fairly intense about things I care about. Emma grinned. I've noticed. Buying restaurant chains is definitely not a slow-moving kind of gesture. In my defense, it seemed like the most logical solution at the time. Next time, maybe start with flowers. Noted. Though now I'm worried that flowers will seem inadequate after the restaurant chain. Emma stepped closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. Alexander? Yes? Sometimes the simplest gestures mean the most. Before he could respond, Emma rose up on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. It was brief and sweet, nothing like the passionate embraces in the romance novels she loved, but it felt perfect. When they broke apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to do everything I can to deserve this, he said quietly. You already do, Emma replied. You just need to believe it. As they stood together in Alexander's office, surrounded by the evidence of his success, but focused only on each other, both of them felt like they were at the beginning of something extraordinary. 2 weeks later, Emma was beginning to understand that dating a billionaire came with a very steep learning curve. Alexander, I can't go to a charity gala, she said, pacing around his penthouse living room. I don't have anything to wear. I don't know how to act at fancy events, and I'll probably embarrass you. Alexander looked up from his laptop, where he'd been showing her pictures of the venue. First of all, you could never embarrass me. Second, we'll get you a dress. And third, you know exactly how to act. Just be yourself. Myself doesn't usually attend events where a single plate of food costs more than my weekly salary. Your old weekly salary, Alexander corrected. You got a raise, remember? Emma shot him a look. Not funny. Alexander closed the laptop and pulled her down beside him on the massive couch. Emma, I know this is overwhelming, but these events are just part of my world, and I want to share my world with you. What if I say something wrong? What if I use the wrong fork, or don't know which wine goes with which course? Then you'll be refreshingly honest in a room full of people who are pretending to care about things they don't actually care about. Trust me, you'll be the most interesting person there. Emma wasn't convinced, but she could see how much this meant to Alexander. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd been incredibly patient as she adjusted to the reality of dating someone whose casual spending money exceeded her annual income. He'd also been true to his word about keeping their relationship separate from her work. At the diner, he was just another customer, albeit one who tipped extremely well and always requested her section. Their co-workers had mostly stopped staring, though Emma still caught Sarah making hard eyes at them occasionally. Fine, Emma said. I'll go to your fancy charity thing. But I'm going to need help with the dress situation. Alexander's face lit up. I know exactly who to call. Which was how Emma found herself the next afternoon in the most expensive boutique she'd ever seen, being fussed over by a personal stylist named Vivian, who spoke with a slight French accent and had opinions about everything. "With your coloring, we want something rich, but not overwhelming," Vivian said, holding up a deep emerald dress. "This Valentino would be perfect." Emma looked at the price tag and nearly choked. "That dress costs more than my car." "Don't look at the prices," Alexander said, appearing beside her with an armload of options. "Just focus on finding something you feel beautiful in." "Alexander, I can't let you spend this much money on a dress I'll wear once." "Who says you'll only wear it once?" "Besides, think of it as an investment in our social life." Emma was about to argue when Vivian reappeared with another option, a midnight blue dress that was simpler than the others, but somehow more elegant. "Try this one," Vivian said firmly. "I have a feeling about it." 20 minutes later, Emma stared at herself in the fitting room mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. The dress fit perfectly, making her look sophisticated and confident in a way she'd never felt before. "Come out," Alexander called. "Let me see." Emma stepped out of the fitting room, suddenly self-conscious. Alexander's expression when he saw her made all her worries fade away. "Emma," he breathed, "you look incredible." "You think so?" "I think I'm going to have to fight off every man at the gala who tries to ask you to dance." Emma blushed, but felt a warm glow of confidence. Maybe she could do this after all. The night of the gala, Emma's nerves returned full force. Alexander picked her up in a car that probably cost more than most people's houses, driven by a chauffeur who treated them like royalty. "Remember," Alexander said as they pulled up to the venue, "these people put their pants on one leg at a time, just like everyone else. They're not better than you. They just have more money." The ballroom was stunning, all crystal chandeliers and golden details, filled with men in tuxedos and women in designer gowns. Emma felt like she'd stepped into a movie. "Alexander Stone." A distinguished older man approached them with a warm smile. "Good to see you, my boy. And who is this lovely young lady?" "Charles, I'd like you to meet Emma Rodriguez." "Emma, this is Charles Pemberton. He runs the foundation we're supporting tonight." Emma shook Charles's hand, grateful that Alexander had spent the car ride briefing her on the key players she'd meet. "Ms. Rodriguez, what a pleasure. How do you and Alexander know each other?" Emma glanced at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm a waitress at one of the restaurants in his portfolio," she said honestly. Instead of the snobbery she'd expected, Charles's face lit up with interest. "How wonderful. I imagine you have fascinating insights into the hospitality industry. I'd love to hear your perspective on employee satisfaction and service roles." And just like that, Emma found herself in an animated conversation about workers' rights and the importance of treating service employees with respect. Other people joined the conversation, and Emma was surprised to discover that many of them were genuinely interested in her opinions. "You're doing great," Alexander murmured in her ear during a quiet moment. "I told you you'd be the most interesting person here." As the evening progressed, Emma began to relax and even enjoy herself. The food was incredible, the wine was better than anything she'd ever tasted, and Alexander was attentive without being possessive. During the auction portion of the evening, Emma watched in amazement as people casually bid thousands of dollars on vacation packages and artwork. "This is surreal," she whispered to Alexander. "That woman just bid $50,000 on a weekend in Napa." "It's for a good cause," Alexander replied. "The foundation provides scholarships for underprivileged kids to attend college." Emma felt a stab of emotion. Just a few months ago, she'd been struggling to afford her own education. Now she was sitting in a room where people spent more on charity auctions than she'd ever seen in her life. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer announced, "our final item of the evening is a very special offering. Mr. Alexander Stone has graciously donated a private dinner for 6 at his penthouse. prepared by a Michelin-starred chef, with all proceeds going directly to our scholarship fund. Emma stared at Alexander in surprise. You donated a dinner party. I thought it might be nice to support the cause, he said modestly. The bidding started at $5,000 and quickly escalated. Emma watched in fascination as wealthy socialites competed for the chance to dine at Alexander's home. $25,000, called out a woman in a sparkling red dress. $30,000, countered a man near the back. Emma leaned over to Alexander. People are paying $30,000 to have dinner at your apartment. Penthouse, Alexander corrected absently, his attention on the bidding. And it's for charity. $35,000, the woman in red called out again. Emma had an idea. Before she could second-guess herself, she stood up. $50,000, she called out clearly. The room went silent. Alexander stared at her in shock. Emma, he hissed, what are you doing? Bidding on dinner with my boyfriend, she said with a grin. Going once, going twice, sold to the lovely lady in blue. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Emma sat down, her heart pounding with adrenaline. Did I just spend $50,000 on dinner at your house? She asked Alexander. You did. Emma, that's incredibly generous, but it's your money anyway, Emma said with a shrug. I figured this way the charity gets a big donation, and I get to have dinner with you without worrying about impressing strangers. Alexander stared at her for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed. You are absolutely brilliant and completely insane. I prefer creatively practical, Emma said. Besides, now I can say I once bought a $50,000 dinner. That's definitely going in my autobiography. As they danced later that evening, Alexander pulled her close. You know, I think you might be getting the hang of this whole billionaire lifestyle thing. Maybe, Emma said, though I still think $50,000 for dinner is ridiculous, even if it is for charity. Fair enough, but you have to admit, it was a pretty impressive power move. Emma smiled up at him. I learned from the best. After all, you did buy an entire restaurant chain just to give me my job back. Touché, Alexander said, spinning her around the dance floor. I think we're going to be very good for each other, Emma Rodriguez. I think you might be right, Alexander Stone. As the music played and they moved together among the crystal and gold, Emma realized she wasn't pretending to fit into Alexander's world anymore. She was finding her own place in it, on her own terms. And that felt perfect. 6 months later, Emma was running late for her shift at Sunset Diner. But for once she didn't mind. She'd just gotten her acceptance letter to nursing school. Not just any nursing school, but the prestigious program at Metropolitan University that she dreamed of attending but never thought she could afford. With the tuition assistance from Sunset Restaurant Group and her savings from the increased salary, her education was completely covered. More importantly, she'd earned this acceptance through her own hard work and grades. Sorry I'm late, she called to Rick as she rushed through the diner's back door, tying her apron as she moved. No problem, Rick called back, but you have a customer waiting at table 7 who specifically requested you. Emma smiled. Alexander had texted her that morning saying he had some news to share, and he'd insisted on meeting at the diner rather than his penthouse. She'd grown to love how he still came to her workplace, treating it as a normal part of their routine rather than something beneath his status. She grabbed a coffee pot and headed to table 7, where Alexander was sitting with an unusually serious expression on his face. Good morning, Mr. Stone, she said playfully, using the formal address they maintained during her work hours. The usual. Actually, I was hoping we could talk first, Alexander said. Could you sit for a minute? Emma glanced around the diner. The morning rush was light, and Sarah was handling the other tables easily. Sure, but just for a minute. She slid into the booth across from Alexander, noticing that he seemed nervous about something. Emma, we've been together for 6 months now, and they've been the best 6 months of my life. Mine too, Emma said softly, reaching across to squeeze his hand. I've learned so much from you, about what really matters, about treating people with respect regardless of their job or social status, about finding joy in simple things. Alexander, where is this going? You've changed me, Emma. You've made me want to be a better person, not just a more successful businessman. Emma felt a flutter of anxiety. You're starting to sound like you're about to break up with me. Alexander laughed, some of his nervousness fading. No, definitely not that. Actually, I'm trying to work up the courage to ask you something important. Before Emma could respond, Alexander slid out of the booth and, to her complete shock, dropped to one knee beside the table. The entire diner went silent. Emma heard Sarah gasp from across the room. Emma Rodriguez, Alexander said, pulling out a small velvet box. 6 months ago, you changed my life by spilling coffee on my attitude and serving me the best pancakes I'd ever tasted. Will you marry me? Emma stared at the ring, a perfect solitaire diamond that somehow managed to be elegant without being ostentatious, and then at Alexander's hopeful face. Alexander, she breathed, are you proposing to me in a diner? I'm proposing to you in the place where we met, where you taught me that the best things in life don't require a reservation or a dress code. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. It was perfect, romantic, but not pretentious, meaningful, but not over the top. Yes, she said, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. Yes, absolutely yes. The diner erupted in cheers and applause. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as their audience of customers and co-workers celebrated around them. I love you, Emma Rodriguez, Alexander said against her lips. I love you too, Alexander Stone. Even if you do have terrible timing, I'm supposed to be working. Actually, Rick called from behind the counter, why don't you take the rest of the day off? I think this counts as a special occasion. As Emma admired her ring and accepted congratulations from everyone in the diner, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. A year ago, she'd been struggling to pay for community college classes and worried about her future. Now she was engaged to an amazing man, accepted to nursing school, and surrounded by people who'd become like family. So, Alexander said as they prepared to leave the diner, what do you want to do for the rest of our day off? Well, we should probably call our families and tell them the news, Emma said practically. Already done. I called your mom this morning to ask for her blessing. Emma's jaw dropped. You called my mother? I wanted to do this right. She's very excited, by the way, and she wants to know when you're bringing me over for dinner again. What else have you planned that you haven't told me about? Alexander grinned. That's all the advanced planning I did. The rest is up to us. Emma looked around the diner one more time, at the tables where she'd served hundreds of customers, at the kitchen where she'd learned to balance multiple orders, at the booth where she'd first met the man she was going to marry. You know what I want to do? She said. What? I want to go for a walk. Just walk around the city and enjoy being engaged. That's it? No fancy champagne lunch? No shopping for wedding dresses? Emma smiled. Maybe later. Right now, I just want to be with my fiancé and enjoy the fact that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in the most ordinary places. Alexander offered her his arm. Lead the way, future Mrs. Stone. Actually, Emma said with a mischievous smile, I'm thinking Emma Rodriguez Stone has a nice ring to it. Perfect, Alexander agreed. Though I have to warn you, Our wedding is going to be quite the merger of two very different worlds. Good thing I've gotten better at navigating your world, and you've learned to appreciate mine." As they walked out of Sunset Diner together, past the window where Alexander had first seen Emma laughing with her coworkers, both of them felt the deep satisfaction of a story that had found its perfect ending. The waitress who'd stood up for what was right had found love with the billionaire, who'd learned that the best investments aren't always measured in dollars. And sometimes, the most beautiful love stories begin with spilled coffee and a customer complaint about Eggs Benedict. What did you think of Emma's and Alexander's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one of our stories, and stick around to watch more heartfelt tales by clicking right here on the final screen.